Morning, Kia. Morning, Jessica. Thanks for joining early. I'm expecting load shedding to have an effect on today's session, not from a transmission point, but because we don't have load shedding here on campus. But I think I've already received apologies from students who are experiencing load shedding in the areas that they live, and therefore it would be very difficult for them to join us. But let's work with whoever is here. Let's get Marley on board. I know that Minka is not going to join us. She's definitely experiencing load shedding at their place. Everybody, in the meantime, everybody else as well. You fine? I haven't graded your class test. Don't worry. I got it. The intention was to sit down last night in the market, and then Eskom decided no, it's going to be load shedding, so I didn't get around to grading it. I'll do it sometime this afternoon and give you some feedback on your mini essays that you wrote. I read through some of them just before the class started, and I'm quite happy that you were that you handled that well. As I said, it's not challenging, but it's like with the case studies that we have every week. You've become familiar with how things are going to be done in year 3, in your final year. But yeah, health-wise, everybody else is fine, all good. I think we're probably only going to have these 3 today. I'll quickly then do attendance. Jessica, Kia, and Marley would be the only ones that I can quickly tick off. Let's see. Jessica is here. Marley is here, and Kia is here. Right. Let's save that. Move on. I can modify it later if there's any changes. Let's just go to back to chapter 4 and pick up where we left off yesterday. If I can go back to maybe a couple of pages and just quickly have that image of the 5 steps in the research process highlighted again, just as a starting point. It's quite simple and quite clear that the order in which the steps happen is rather self-explanatory. If you have a specific marketing issue that you want researched, then obviously it would start with defining what the problem is, very clearly, specifically detailing what the problem is that you want to have solved, which immediately becomes the objective of your research. Designing a research plan, we did yesterday as well, where different designs are available to you to design your research plan. One of the most important phases, step number 3, and I would actually say all 3 of the final 3 steps are equally important, because this is where, with all best intentions, everything can go wrong, or it actually can work out perfectly. I think the biggest challenge lies in collecting the data and ensuring the validity of the data that you've collected and ensuring the accuracy of it. Your data collection process also goes through a number of phases, which would be to start off, or initially you start off with the collection of secondary and primary information, where your secondary information referred to any information that is available on the subject or the problem that you are researching. In other words, if a study has been done already, that's a starting point, because there's already information that is available. I can remember when I did my honors at Stellenbosch University, one of the topics that we had to research was we had to predict what the water resources in South Africa would look like, or accessibility to water resources would look like by the year 2015. Now, that was 1987, and that we did that research. So that's quite some distance, 30 years into the future. But however, our starting point was to go to the library and we found previous research that was done by the Department of Water Affairs. That was the first study that was published was in 1972. There was one in 1982, and we used that as a starting point. In other words, that's the secondary data that we used, and that assisted us maybe also in the design of the research plan. And strangely enough, our predictions were rather accurate, although we weren't just by applying the model and using the secondary information. Because I mean, how much do I know about predicting the water resources? We just followed the trail, and it was quite clear already because of the climate change that it would be a challenge. And yeah, a couple of years ago we had serious problems. Our prediction was just a bit worse, and that is that we will run out of water resources to the point where the water resources, underground water resources, are going to be depleted as well, more specifically as a result of your level of pollution. But anyway, that's secondary information. In other words, it's available already. In a case like F&B, for instance, that is quite popular in this chapter, they can go to the sales department and they can just see how many sales were made. So that's statistics that's available and can be used as a starting point, because then you've got a database of clients that you can use in your research. Your primary information is obviously any new information that is obtained. Maybe a particular problem that you've identified that you want research that's never been researched before. So you would not have any secondary information, and everything that you will collect in your research would obviously be primary information then. Data collection methods, we're going to detail about what each of them mean, but basically you've got a quantitative or a qualitative method or methods that can be used. We also have to design a research instrument, go through a process of sampling, which could be probability or a non-probability sampling. We'll also explain that in a short while. And then obviously the legwork, the field work needs to happen as well. Nobody's going to collect information or just dump it in your lab. A bit of work, legwork needs to be done as well. On the bottom left-hand side of the screen, you'll see there is a website, igym.com. I'm going to use that as an example for the rest of this chapter in explaining or applying the research process. It was a study that was done jointly by me and my wife. I assisted her when she did a master's degree at Western Cape University that was about 6 years ago. And we, for those who are not familiar with iGym, it's basically a software program that is available. It's still available. You can go to that site and have a quick test done. It's to see how it's to improve your peripheral vision and your ability to react quicker, and also to improve your memory and your cognitive development. And that was the intention of the research. We targeted a grade 8, 2 grade 8 classes at a high school in the northern suburbs. The one was exposed to the iGym. They were using it for a month, and the others were not using it for a month. They were just using the normal ways of learning. And although initially, because it was iGym is the brainchild of Cheryl Calder, Dr. Cheryl Calder, previously in her heyday, the captain of the women's South African women's hockey team. She's also a doctor that studied specifically in sports science, and when she came up with the iGym, I can remember the first time I was instrumental in that was way back in 1993 when we guinea pigged some of the English cricket players, or used them as guinea pigs for some of the initial research, which obviously has progressed a great deal. It's enough about that, but if you want to, it's actually quite intriguing. I know that Discovery Vitality members can also use this and try and improve their driving ability, because that was the intention initially of iGym, to improve your peripheral visual on the sports field. In other words, you're running with the ball, you're running with the hockey stick. You don't want to, you break your speed, and you actually lose concentration and control of the ball if you look left and right to who you should pass to. If your peripheral vision is developed to such an extent that you can actually see from the corner of your eye where your support runners are, then you know who to pass the ball to and when to pass it. So it was done very successfully, and she won the Rugby World Cup with Australia, with England in 2003 when she was their eye coach. And she won it with the with the Springboks in 2007, and have numerous accolades globally, international cricket teams and Olympians. I think Bottas, one of the Formula One drivers, is currently one of her clients. And I noticed that there's Johnny Wilkinson, the English fly half from a couple of years ago. A lot of people, individuals, anything else. There's a lot of golfers that has successfully used the method. So it's quite nice, but we intended to do the research to determine if there is a direct link between, or if it can also contribute to your cognitive development. In other words, do kids concentrate better if they use this? And therefore, are the academic results better as well? While in the process, they're also improving their skills on the sports field. But anyway, let's get Tanika on board as well. Welcome to the session, Tanika. We're busy with the third step in the market research process, and that is data collection. We have explained to you what the difference is between secondary and primary information. And now we obviously also want to use different, or know that there are different methods available to us. And we can get qualitative data, or we can get quantitative data. Your qualitative data is usually done through observation or focus groups, or in-depth interviews, or projective techniques. I'm not going to go into too much detail about all the different quantitative data collection methods, but it is interesting to just observe that although many of them are similar, one of the ones who are slightly more effective, like the focus groups and in-depth interviews, is where you select specific groups which you know have the ability to answer the questions that you're going to answer in your survey. There's no point in selecting somebody and put them in your sample group that you want to use, and then those people don't have the ability. So when we selected our data, it was a combination, it was a mixed method that was used. So sometimes you know that your personalized administrative surveys is where a researcher has a copy of the survey or the questionnaire with him. He asks the questions to the people, and they just tick it on their page and hand it in. Often nowadays, with the use of modern technology, self-administered surveys is quite popular, but you don't always know if the people are not struggling with a particular question, and as a result of that, they either leave it blank, or they don't, they answer it incorrectly, or because it can affect the outcome of your research. The information is not accurate. But very popular methods of collection is a combination of your qualitative and quantitative, where, as we identified yesterday, quantitative refers to the amount of data that you are collecting. In other words, what's the size of your sampling groups. how much information do you need and are you getting in? And qualitative is more about specific answers to a particular question. The quality of the answer is more important than the actual number of answers that you get in. You have to, obviously, as part of your data collection process, um, also develop a research instrument. And your research instrument refers to the tool that you're going to use to collect the raw data. Is it going to be in the form of a questionnaire? With our iGEM, it was quite simple. One of the requirements were that students need to have, or the learners needed to have access to computers. In other words, we took them to the computer room for that particular class, and the others just stayed in the normal class environment. And they did the same surveys, but the one group who were using the iGEM, obviously, and that's the reason why we chose those two groups. We want to know that if you don't use the iGEM, are you worse off than when you do use it? So obviously the data collection methods are different. The research tools were exactly the same. That was specific questionnaires, and you could actually document the results. But it is very important that when you do develop your research instrument, that the questions that you ask in your measuring instrument, the questions that you ask must be directly related to the problem that you are researching. You also need to ensure that the participants in this survey, in the research, understand the questions that's being asked, and that they actually also have the ability to answer it. If somebody, there's no point in asking a question about online banking services to a 12-year-old, because they don't even have a bank account yet. Okay, so they're not in a position to answer the questions that you have included in your survey, for instance. Finally, also in step 3, the data collection phase, is the sampling. What part or what subset or group of the population are you going to use in your research? Now we have a probability sampling method and a non-probability sample method. With your probability sample method, it basically means that everybody has an equal chance. Everybody that you have identified. Let's say, for instance, in our case, we said that particular year group in a particular high school. Now, everybody in that particular year group, in this case, it was grade 8. Everybody in the grade 8 group must have an equal chance to be selected to be included in this particular research. Where with your non-probability sampling, the researcher sort of determines what the criteria is and is selective in who they want to be part of the research. Not to manipulate the results, but just because they, according to their judgment, have identified individuals which is best suited to provide them with the information that they need. Right, let's go to the next step, which would be, or we can just, there's different sampling methods as well that I've listed under the probability and the non-probability methods. Let's just identify some of them. Random sampling is quite simple. There's no particular method in how you decide who's included in your sampling group that you've selected. A systematic sampling, for instance, if you've got 10,000 customers at, already, or 10,000 customers with the bank, you decide that for this particular research, you are going to select every 10th client. That's a systematic process that you follow. With the cluster sampling, you can decide to either cluster them into different categories. In other words, online, it's still about online banking, but the online banking in this case is it's related to people do online banking through their phones, or do they online banking through the internet, for instance. So that's two different clusters, and you keep them together. You cluster them together does not affect the end result because your research is still online banking. In our case, it was 2 grade 8 groups. The one the sizes of the groups were exactly the same. Both classes were 32 students or learners, and the both groups are in grade 8. It's equal split between genders, male and female. So that's how we clustered the different groups. Stratified a stratified sampling is where the researcher plays a slightly bigger part in the decision. For instance, if we look at the participants in the research are divided in different stratas. In other words, for instance, they still, if we apply to F and B, both or the people doing online banking can do online banking using debit cards only, or using debit cards and credit cards, or they could be people who use only credit cards for that matter. So for a stratified sampling, you are going to select equal amount of participants from each of those 3 groups. Where with clustering, it's everybody in that particular cluster that you've decided. So in this case, if we have 3 different clusters, the stratified sampling is going to be an equal number of people from all 3 those different clusters. Non-probability, I don't want to highlight anything in particular here. I just refer to maybe what a referral or snowball sampling is. I'm not sure if any of you have been involved in any form of research by completing a survey or a questionnaire, but usually when people who are participating in such a survey one of the final questions that they're asked is, do they know or can they provide details of 1 or 2 people that they can think of that might also be interested in the particular service. So in other words, it has a snowball effect. If there's 10 people that's being interviewed, each of them are required to also provide 2 more people. So in other words, immediately you're getting, you are through a more accurate kind of process, you are determining what your sample group would look like. Because I'm not going to refer a particular friend of mine, for instance, and provide his information to them if I know he's not going to be interested. Okay, so you are sort of pre-qualifying the people when you're doing your referral or snowballing sampling. Right, your quota sampling does not refer to anything related to politics, but researchers provide a quota. In other words, it's usually your age, your gender, your race, and then they distribute questionnaires based on these quotas. For instance, F&B may select on a non-probability basis 100 non-users of social media and 100 irregular users of social media and 100 regular users of social media as 3 different groups. Okay, so similarly to the stratified one, but not as structured. So let's go to the final part of the data collection phase, and that is the field work. How are you going to distribute the measuring instrument to the sample group, the people who needs to do, the people who are part of the research? How do we distribute it? In our case, when we went to the high school, it was usually done half an hour prior to the admin period, because we just needed it to be done for a 1 month period, half an hour every second day at the school. And as researchers and the people who assisted us actually took the questionnaires and the documentation that the learners have to complete every day as part of the research directly to the teacher and in the class, and hand it out to the students. Often you'll find that the information is just provided to the people who are doing the field work. You've seen probably have driven past a group or maybe sometimes just individual who sits in a camp chair next to the road, maybe at an intersection, at a very difficult or busy intersection, and they've got a clipboard and they are just ticking off. And those are all field workers who are collecting information. In that particular case, they will be observing, and that's the particular method of collecting data that they're using. It is very important, however, that if there are not going to be, if it's self-administered, there's no way that we can actually train the people who are taking the survey. But if you are using field workers who are providing the survey or the documentation to the people who are part of the sample group, then it's very important that you train them correctly. Otherwise, because you are not going to be there, and if the message doesn't go across in the same manner to different groups, and that's why for our research that we've done at the school, we decided to go there ourselves, because I know what I'm going to say is going to be repeated by the person in the class next to me. So the same message goes out, and it just makes your research more accurate and credible. Right. Now we've collected a lot of data. We've done all the collection, and what now? Where do we actually, what's the next step? And that is obviously to like most people refer to it in research, they clean the data just to make sure, not manipulate and change it and chuck out some of the stuff, but just to make sure that everything was done correctly. It's almost like the validation of your after election, when the votes are counted, the auditors come in and they just check. They don't change it, and they just check and see if the same process have been followed and if all the forms have been filled in correctly. Then after that, you formulate your findings, and this is you now have the statistical data to formulate your results, your findings. This is information that is now one step away from being provided to the company who's conducting the research, in a form of what we call on the next slide, your research report. And that is very important. What's the point of setting your objectives initially after you've identified the problem? If you've collected and analyzed the data, what are you going to do with it? You just don't want to ending up in a bin or in a filing cabinet or stored somewhere in a folder where nobody can remember where to retrieve it. It's very important that the information that has been analyzed and the results that you have found from the research, that now becomes that finds itself in the form of a research report that obviously are going to highlight the areas of concern, as well as provide you with recommendations on how you can address the problem that you initially set out. Otherwise, what was the purpose of the whole research process? Right. Now, some of the tools that is available to us, and remember at the start of the chapter we said that social media is a very important tool that is nowadays used, because it provides instant information to the people conducting the research. Fortunately for us, the majority of people who usually form part of a sample group for research, for them it's part of their lifestyle to use modern technology. So they're not unfamiliar to it, but it is important that we engage in the benefits that social media and all different platforms on social media that's available provide you, because the information is there already. It's just a question of just picking the one that you best want to access. We've got 10 minutes left of this session. I'm pretty sure we should easily be done in this time, but if we're not, it shouldn't take much longer than an additional couple of minutes after we resume. Um, Cell phones is probably the most familiar one because even in a third world country like South Africa, a lot of people have cell phones. As a matter of fact, a lot of people have more than one cell phone. And yeah, even I would say even your a large portion of the unemployed market have a cell phone as well, because that's a means that somebody that might give him a job is going to be able to contact him. So cell phones is a very is a very popular analytical tool to use, purely because almost all of us have phones. Um, the important thing about a cell phone, however, is, or the benefit is that it's rather cost effective, um, and you can get information on current trends immediately, and you can also identify what your competitors are doing. There are different and Google analytical tools, or Google Analytics is one of those platforms that you can use, because it provides you with all that information that I've just highlighted. We also very successfully can use research on by using Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, and there um, again we have two different approaches, and that would be the interactive approach, where you've selected a specific group and you want them to respond to certain questions that you've sent, either via Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, whatever platform you've chosen to use. So that is it's an accurate way of collecting the information, because you know that um, the information that, or the questions that sent out requires an answer, and it's simple yes or no. Popular one that often pops up is obviously is the one of um, click yes to opt out, or if you want to continue using this service, then don't respond. So that those are ways um, in which valuable information can be collected, because you remove people from the list if they obviously are not interested. I also know that a lot of calls nowadays, immediately after you've conducted, let's say for instance you've got an issue in your phone, a particular business that resolves the issue, and when you say goodbye, it's still on the phone that says, can you quickly just rate the service that you've just experienced from 1 to 5. It's usually not more than two, maximum three questions. Takes you about 5 to 10 seconds, and they've collected valuable information in that regard. Um, it happens nowadays when you go to the shop, you swipe your card, your smart shopper card, or your debit card, your bank card. Every single time that is done, and the receipt is printed for you by the tool, that information is immediately available to that particular company. So the other day also did some shopping at a place where I normally don't go, purely because it's out the way, but that was more convenient on that particular day. I swiped my card and paid for the 5 or 6 items I bought. And before I got home, I got a WhatsApp from that particular company that I've just bought from, about specials they have 2 days later. It's amazing. And I think that just shows you the power of all of these of the social media tools, and more specifically because the information is immediately available, because that's what millennials want. We'll see it at the final part of this particular chapter. We'll be dealing with complaints, customer complaints, and yeah, it's people want instant reaction. They want their problem solved now. In an earlier class this morning in consumer behavior, we spoke about the levels of patience, or the question was raised: how impatient is Generation Z? I mean, you guys are all Gen Zs. I mean, are you a patient bunch or not, or what would you say? Um, um, is Generation Z impatient bunch of individuals? It's no right or wrong answer here. I just want to know from people who are from that generation. What do you, how would you rate yourself? Would you rate yourself as a patient individual or not? Anybody? Kia, are you patient?
I think I'm patient.
Do other people think you're patient?
I don't know, Tanika.
No, 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 no.
Your mom.
People, and I haven't conducted that research. I just know that it's information that's available. But from marketing research that's been done over the last 20 years, published um, conclusions and findings were that Gen Zs are very brand conscious. Um, and again, it's not every single Gen Z. And if you're not brand conscious, that doesn't all of a sudden make you a millennial. You're still a Gen Z, but the majority are brand conscious. They like visiting malls and these open, the, centers where there's more than one shop available. They like to compare. They are not necessarily brand loyal, brand conscious, but not necessarily brand loyal. If you've always been wearing Nike and now Adidas all of a sudden, similar quality garment offer you a better deal, you'll quickly change. Also, when it comes to jobs, your careers, you stay within the same industry. You're loyal to the industry, but you're not loyal to a particular employer. You'll go to a different job because it offers you better benefits. Where 20 years ago it was people who wanted to stay with a particular business for as long as possible to give them job security, to increase their pension and whatever, regardless of what your motivation is, or what your motivation was. The different generations react differently to or react differently, and that's why multi-generational marketing is well, it poses a few challenges to marketers, but it's definitely something they need to be aware of, that they do not keep a particular generation of consumers in a particular segment and just forget about the other attributes that that particular generation also have. So they they are faced with a lot of challenges. I think very often because especially if you find that there are older staff members who are not as familiar and or comfortable with the modern technology, or slower to learn all the attributes of the modern technology, it can become frustrating. But I think the impatience claim the Gen Zs are labeled with is based on the fact that um, you, you want information now. You live in a time that information is available to you now. If a tsunami hit Japan this morning, you want to be the person texting all your friends or posting all your friends. Did you hear about this? Did you see that? Who? That's just how you are. You want to be the one sending out the messages and sharing the information and putting it into the world rather than receiving it. You want to be the first one, and that means that you obviously will spend a lot of time online. Um, um, because you don't want to miss out on any information. So not to miss out on anything, because we have less than a minute to go before the session finishes, I'm quickly just going to rather end the session now. Let's take a very short break and we resume immediately, or as immediately as we can, and then we'll finish the chapter. Okay. Thanks. I'll chat to you in just now.